Good morning everyone. This is Pridarshini Tiwari. I welcome you all in the fourth lecture of the subject Code of Civil Procedure 1908. The topic for today's lecture is res judicata, the doctrine of res judicata. So, before dealing in detail with the concept of res judicata, I would first like to summarize here the points which I am going to cover under this lecture. So, today I will be dealing with the introductory part of the res judicata, its purpose, the basis of this doctrine, the applicability of this doctrine under Indian laws, its essential element, the concept of constructive res judicata, and the applicability and non-applicability of this doctrine. So, now let me start with introduction. Res judicata is a Latin term which means a matter which is already adjudicated. When a matter is adjudicated and the final judgment has been given and there is no remedy available against the matter for appeal, such judgment must be considered as a bar on the institution of any subsequent suit on the same cause of action and between the same parties. So, in other words, it can be said that doctrine of res judicata preclude the courts from entertaining any subsequent suit on the same cause of action. Doctrine of res judicata plays an important role in determination that the court's time is being used effectively and the justice is being provided to all the litigant persons. Now, let me discuss the meaning of the term res judicata. Res judicata literally means a thing which has been already decided. Here, res means a thing and judicata means already decided. The doctrine operates as a bar on the trial of any subsequent suit on the same cause of action and between the same parties. Things once decided by a competent civil court must be accepted as a conclusive proof unless it is reversed by any higher court. The doctrine is not merely a technical doctrine, but it is a fundamental doctrine based on the principle of conclusiveness of the judgment and finality of litigation. One suit and one judgment is enough for any single dispute. Now let me discuss the basis of this doctrine. The doctrine of res judicata is based upon the following maxims. The first one is interest republica ut sit finis litium. It means it is in the interest of the state that there should be an end of litigation. The finality and conclusiveness of judicial decision for the final termination of dispute in the general interest of community as a matter of public policy, that is interest republica ut sit finis litium. So it is in the interest of the state, it is in the interest of the public that there should be an interest of the litigation. So now the next maxim is nemo dabit vis vexari pro una et idem causa. It means no one shall be vexed twice over for the same cause of action. Thus the doctrine is also founded on justice, equity and good conscience. The interest of the individuals that he should be protected from multiplication of litigation. And the last one is res judicata pro veritate occupator. It means a judicial decision must be accepted as correct. So, it can be said that the doctrine of res judicata has founded its place on the basis of public and private policies. This doctrine is based on the principle of public policy by the virtue of maxim number 1st and 3rd, and it is based on private policy by the virtue of maxim number 2, that is nemo dabit vis vexari pro una et idem causa. The principle of res judicata is founded on the ancient Indian principle of pragnya, which is previous judgment. The principle is stated in Brihaspati Smriti. If a person who has been defeated in a suit according to law files the plaint once again, he must be told that he has been defeated already. This is called a plea of pragnya. So, the doctrine of res judicata is completely based on the Indian principle of pragnya. Now let me discuss the purpose of this doctrine. The whole sole purpose of this doctrine is to prevent the multiplicity of the proceeding and to reduce the burden of court. And it also aims to prevent injustice to the parties of a case that has been supposedly conducted by providing closure to a judgment and precluding any further claims. It also aimed to prevent unnecessary wastage of court resources, and it also aims to prevent the recovery of damages from the defendant twice for the same injury. Now, when we come on the Indian laws in context with this doctrine यानी कि the doctrine of res judicata or the rule of conclusiveness of the judgment has been embodied in the Indian law under section 11 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908, which says no court shall try any suit or issue in which the matter directly and substantially in issue has been directly and substantially in issue in a former suit between the same parties or between the parties under whom they or any of them claim litigating under the same title in a civil court competent to try such subsequent suit or the suit in which the issue has been subsequently raised and has been finally heard and decided by such court. So from the above definition, it is very clear that if any matter has been already decided by a competent civil court, no further action can be taken by any court on the same cause of action when the parties to both the suit is same. Now let me discuss the essential element of this doctrine. Following are the essential element of the doctrine of res judicata. The following essential needs to be fulfilled to constitute the concept of res judicata. The first one, the matter must be directly and substantially in issue in two suits. Before this, I would like to tell you all that for application of this doctrine, there must be two suits. One that is previously instituted and second that is subsequently instituted. Then the next essential is that the matter must be directly and substantially in issue in the two suits, which means the matter directly and substantially in issue in the latter suit must be the same matter which was directly and substantially in issue in the former suit. Matter in issue is different from the subject matter and the object of the suit, as well as from the relief that may be asked for in it and the cause of action on which it is based. And the rule of res judicata requiring the identity of the matter in issue will apply even if the subject matter, the object and the relief and the cause of action are different. It is the matter in issue and not the subject matter of the suit that forms the essential test of res judicata. When we read explanation number 3 of section 11, it makes very clear that a matter cannot be said to have been directly and substantially in issue in a suit unless it was alleged by one party and denied or admitted either expressly or impliedly by any other. Thus, a matter in respect of which no relief is claimed cannot become directly and substantially in issue even if a decree is passed by a competent civil court. The next essential element of this doctrine is the parties to the suit must be same. The parties to the suit must be same. It means for the bar of res judicata, the former suit must have been a suit between the same parties or between the parties under whom they or any of them claim litigating. Res judicata is not only affects the parties to the suit but their previes also, that is person claiming under them. A judgment not inter partes or in rem is not a res judicata. The third essential condition to constitute the bar of res judicata is that the parties must have litigated under the same title. It means in the same capacity. It means that there should not be any change in the position of the parties. And the fourth essential condition for this doctrine is that the court which decided the former suit must have been a court competent to try the subsequent suit or the suit in which such issue is subsequently raised. The expression competent to try means competent to try the subsequent suit if brought at the time the first suit was brought. Competency relates both to pecuniary jurisdiction and subject matter. It has no reference to territorial jurisdiction. A finding of a criminal court does not bind the civil courts. And the fifth and the last essential element to constitute the bar of res judicata is that the former suit must be heard and finally decided, which means the matter directly and substantially in issue in the subsequent suit must have been heard and finally decided by the court in the first suit. A matter will be said to have been finally decided notwithstanding that the former suit was disposed of ex parte or dismissed for failure to produce evidence when time was allowed to do so. There should be a final decision on which the court has exercised its judicial mind. So these are all the essential elements which needs to be fulfilled together in order to constitute the concept of res judicata. Now let me discuss what is the concept of constructive res judicata. Constructive res judicata has generally found its place in explanation number 4 of the section 11 of CPC. Generally, res judicata as contained in section 11 CPC operates as a bar to the trial of a subsequent suit on the same cause of action between the same parties. The bar applies not only to the decision itself, it applies also to all the facts and issues involved in the case as necessary steps of the groundwork of the discussion. It has been said that it is a matter of common knowledge that when a party files a suit, he must bring the suit complete. It has been said that suit to include whole claim. He must include all facts pertaining to that case and must claim all the relief that he is entitled to claim. Failure to do so would bar such a party from raising those pleas again. This is called constructive res judicata. It helps in the raising of the bar of res judicata by suitably construing the general principle of subduing a litigant. So this is all about constructive res judicata. Now let me discuss where this doctrine applies. The doctrine of res judicata can be invoked even in the subsequent stage of the same proceeding. In the case of YB Patil versus YL Patil, the court held that once an order is made in the course of proceeding, it becomes final and therefore would be binding upon the parties at any subsequent stage of the same proceeding. Further, this doctrine can also apply against co-defendants. In the case of Mehboob Sahab versus Sayyid Ismail, the court held that the following four conditions must be satisfied for the application of res judicata. There must be a conflict of interest between the defendant concerned. It must be necessary to decide such conflicts in order to give relief to the plaintiff, and the questions between the defendants to be finally decided, co-defendants to be necessary and proper parties to the suit. Further, this doctrine can be applied even between the co-plaintiff, and this doctrine doctrine of res judicata applies equally on execution proceedings as well as the arbitration proceeding. The doctrine of res judicata even applies on quasi judicial proceedings too. Now, where this doctrine does not apply. In the case of Sunil Dutt versus Union of India and the Rai Rosen case, it has been held that the habeas corpus filed under fresh grounds and changed circumstances will not be barred by a previous such petition. So, writ of habeas corpus is complete exception of this doctrine. Dismissal of writ petition in Limeline. In Pujari Bai versus Madan Gopal, it was held res judicata not applicable when dismissed in Limeline without speaking orders or on ground of laches or availability of alternate remedies. So, this is all about res judicata. Thank you so much.